Okay, this is part 2 of Nos4a2. Terry's Primo Subs, Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. Vic walked past a row of motorcycles leaning out front, chrome burning in the afternoon sun. There was a line of girls at the order window, girls in bikini tops and short shorts, laughing bright laughter. How Vic hated the sound of them, which was like hearing glass shatter. She went in. A brass bell dinged on the door. The windows were open, and half a dozen desktop fans were running behind the counter, blowing air out toward the tables, and still it was too hot inside. Long spools of flypaper hung from the ceiling and wavered in the breeze. The brat didn't like looking at that flypaper, at the insects that had been caught on it, to struggle and die while people shoved hamburgers into their mouths directly below. She had not noticed the flypaper when she'd eaten lunch here earlier in the day with her parents. She felt woozy, as if she'd been running around on a full stomach in the August heat. A big man in a white undershirt stood behind the cash register. His shoulders were hairy and crimson with sunburn, and there was a line of zinc painted on his nose. A white plastic tag on his shirt said Pete. He had been here all afternoon. 2 hours before, Vic had stood next to her father while Chris McQueen paid him for their burger baskets and their milkshakes. The two men had talked about the Red Sox, who were on a good run. 1986 was looking like the year they might finally break the curse. Clemens was mowing them down. The kid had the Cy Young locked up with more than a month left to play. Vic turned toward him, if not for any reason than because she recognized him. But then she just stood there in front of him, blinking, no idea what to say. A fan hummed at Pete's back and caught the humid, human smell of him, wafted it into the brat's face. No, she was definitely not feeling too good. She was ready to cry, gripped with an unfamiliar sensation of helplessness. She was here in New Hampshire where she didn't belong. The Shorterway Bridge was stuck in the alley out back, and somehow this was her fault. Her parents were fighting and had no idea how far away she had got from them. All of this needed to be said and more. She needed to call home. She needed to call the police. Someone had to go look at the bridge in the alley. Her thoughts were a sickening turmoil. The inside of her head was a bad place, a dark tunnel full of distracting noise and whirling bats. But the big man saved her the trouble of figuring out where to start. His eyebrows knitted together at the sight of her. "There you are. I was wondering if I was going to see you again. You came back for it, huh?" Vic stared at him blankly. "Came back?" "For the bracelet, one with the butterfly on it?" He poked a key and the register drawer popped open with a clashing chime. Her mother's bracelet was in the back. When Vic saw it, another weak tremor passed through her legs and she let out an unsteady sigh. For the first time since exiting the shorter way and finding herself impossibly in Hampton Beach, she felt something like understanding. She had gone looking for her mother's bracelet in her imagination and somehow she had found it. She had never gone on her bike at all. Probably her parents had never really fought. There was only one way to explain a bridge crammed into an alley. She had gotten home, sunburned and exhausted, with a belly full of milkshake, had passed out on her bed, and now was dreaming. With that in mind, she supposed the best thing she could do was get her mother's bracelet and go back across the bridge. At some point, she would presumably wake up. There was another dull throb of pain behind her left eye. A headache was rooting itself there, a bad one. She couldn't remember ever carrying a headache into a dream before. "Thank you," said the brat as Pete handed the bracelet across the counter to her. "My mom was really worried about it. It's worth a lot." "Really worried, huh?" Pete stuck a pinky in one ear and twisted it back and forth. "Got a lot of sentimental value, I guess." "No, I mean, yes, it does. It belonged to her grandmother, my great-grandmother. But I mean, it's also very valuable." "Uh-huh," he said. "It's an antique," said the brat, not entirely sure why she felt the need to persuade him of its value. "It's only an antique if it's worth something. If it's not worth anything, it's just an old thingamajig." "It's diamonds," the brat said. "Diamonds and gold." Pete laughed, a short, caustic bark of laughter. "It is," she said. Pete said, "Nah, costume jewelry. Those things look like diamonds. zirconia, and see inside the band where it's growing silver. Gold doesn't come off. What's good stays good no matter how much of a beating it takes. His brow wrinkled in an expression of unexpected sympathy. You okay? You don't look so hot. I'm all right, she said. I've had a lot of sun, which seemed a very grown-up thing to say. She wasn't all right, though. She felt dizzy, and her legs were trembling steadily. She wanted to be outside, away from the mingled perfume of peat sweat and onion rings and bubbling deep fat. She wanted this dream over with. Are you sure I can't get you something cold to drink? Pete asked. Thanks, but I had a milkshake when I was here for lunch. If you had a milkshake, you didn't get it here, Pete said. McDonald's, maybe. What we got is frappes. I have to go, she said, turning and staring back toward the door. She was aware of sunburned Pete watching her with real concern and was grateful to him for his empathy. She thought that, in spite of his stink and brusque manner, he was a good man, the kind of man who would worry about a sick-looking girl out on her own along Hampton Beach. But she didn't dare say anything else to him. The ill sweat was damp on her temples and upper lip, and it took a great deal of concentration to clamp down on the tremors in her legs. Her left eye thudded again, a bit less gentle this time. Her conviction that she was only imagining this visit to Terry's, that she was tramping through a particularly forceful dream, was hard to hold on to, like trying to keep a grip on a slick fog. Vic stepped back outside and walked swiftly along the hot concrete past the parked and leaning motorcycles. She opened the door in the small plank fence and stepped into the alley behind Terry's Primo Subs. The bridge hadn't moved. Its exterior walls were crammed right up against the buildings on either side. It hurt to look at dead on. It hurt in her left eye. A cook or a dishwasher, someone who worked in the kitchen, stood in the alley by the dumpster. He wore an apron streaked with grease and blood. Anyone who had a good look at that apron would probably skip getting lunch at Terry's. He was a little man with a bristly face and veined, tattooed arms. He stared at the bridge with an expression located somewhere between outrage and fright. What the motherfuck? The guy said. He cast a confused look at Vic. Do you see that kid? I mean, what the motherfuck is that? My bridge. Don't worry, I'll take it with me, Vic said. She was herself unclear what she meant by this. She gripped her bike by the handlebars, turned it around, and pushed it toward the bridge. She ran alongside it 2 steps and then threw her leg over. The front tire bumped up onto the boards, and she plunged into hissing darkness. The sound, that idiot roar of static, rose as the Raleigh carried her out across the bridge. On the way across, she had believed she was hearing the river below, but that wasn't it. There were long cracks in the walls, and for the first time she looked at them as they flashed by. Through them, she saw a flickering white brilliance, as if the world's largest TV set were just on the other side of the wall, and it was stuck on a channel that wasn't broadcasting. A storm blew against the lopsided and decrepit bridge, a blizzard of light. She could feel the bridge buckling just slightly as the downpour dashed itself against the walls. She shut her eyes, didn't want to see any more, stood up on the pedals and rode for the other side. She tried her prayer-like chant once more. Almost there, almost there. But was too winded and sick to maintain any one thought for long. There was only her breath and the roaring, raging static, that endless waterfall of sound, rising in volume, building to a maddening intensity, and then building some more, until she wanted to cry out for it to stop. The word coming to her lips, stop, stop it, her lungs gathering air to shout, and that was when the bike thudded back down in